All right, somebody made the comment that they didn't think these things were rear-wheel drive. If you look right there, there's the CV joint for the front axle. It is a front-wheel drive car. This is Audi's, I don't want to say it's a brilliant idea, but it's their idea. I think Audi, if the history is right, Audi and Volkswagen merged, or Audi somehow bought into Volkswagen or something in '98. This is a '98, okay? I have another one outside I'll show you. This is my spare '97. The hood is going to be closed, and one of my dogs is sleeping in it. But if you can see through the front there, there's the belt and there's the alternator. This is what they call transverse mounted, which means the motor runs sideways. This is a '97 Jetta. There's my other '97 Jetta. It's a twin to this one I just showed you. Okay? This car, they also make a Jetta that looks just like this. This looks really similar to an A4 Audi. If you see an A4 Audi, most of the body panels actually fit. There may be a little differences with the fenders, but I believe the doors, the whole rear clip, hood, interior pieces may be a little bit different interior. Okay, but this is what they call a non-interference motor, if anybody's familiar with this. What non-interference means, that if this thing isn't an exact valve time in relation to the crankshaft, your wallet's going to feel it. If it's idling and the timing belt breaks, your wallet's going to feel it. This is a very expensive car to repair. I bought the car. It's been, I don't know, a couple, 3 years ago. Let me sit down here. I bought this car a couple, 3 years ago. And I got it from a person that had dumped a ton of money in it. This thing has new tires, new front end, new struts, new tie rod ends. She took it to a shop in Georgia. The timing belt had broke, bent a valve. The turbo was out. They stuck a turbo on it. They pulled the head off. And I'm not joking. I had the receipts. The receipt said, no damage found. When I bought the car from her, it was missing on one cylinder, and I knew exactly what had happened. I asked her, I said, have you had the timing belt replaced? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, so I know what's wrong with it. It's going to need, head work. I saw the new turbo. She showed me the receipts. Brought the thing home. And that's actually that motor sitting over there on the floor. I had stuck, because the heads are, I don't want to say they're unmachinable, but the tolerances on those heads are, I forgot what the tolerance is for throwaway is, 4 thousandths, 3 thousandths. If they're 3 thousandths out of warp, they're throwaway. Mine was like 5. So now I needed a used head. So I have to go buy a used head, get my used head machined, rebuilt, all new gaskets, new head bolts because they're torqued to yield, and I probably stuck another $1,500 in this car. On top of what I paid for it, plus what the other woman had, like $2,500 in a turbo. Well, let me back up. She said that the shop said they couldn't find any damage, and then just stuck the head back on. Well, I pulled the head off, and you could literally pour water, take the valve train out so the valves are all shut, pour water in each exhaust port and each intake port, and water just pours out 3 of the valves. You can see where they've hit the pistons, and I'm like, man, I'm glad I don't work or own this shop. But anyways, I put this car back together, and my biggest mistake was you line the timing marks up for top dead center. There's a notch and a mark on this. There's a mark right there. Notch in the thing, and then there's a notch right here on the head. Big mistake. Don't ever set the timing that way. I did. I was one tooth off. The car ran fine. It was a little sluggish. It wasn't fast like it should have been. I've driven these before, and these things here, they get up and go. Especially if you unplug the wastegate. You know, you can get 8-9 pounds of boost out of, maybe 10. Blow the piston rings off, but anyways, this was the result over the course of 6 months. Remember I said this is what they call a non-interference motor. Okay? This one has been touching. You can see how shiny it is right here. This one has been touching. You can see how shiny it is, okay? This one was touching and finally let go. Valves are really strong coming in and going back out. They do not take any side-to-side tolerances. You can even see the stem still in there, okay? See where it's been touching the piston? Been touching the piston? Been touching the piston? That's the connecting rod you see the top of. So, out comes this motor. In goes this motor. I've been watching this thing for quite a while. I've been bugging the guy. I actually went to South America and come back and he still had it. It was an 80,000 mile motor. I put it in. Kid drove it around, I don't know, another 6-7 months. One day he says it was hard to start. Brings it home and now it won't start at all. I'm like, oh great. So, you know, I go ahead and start checking everything. I pulled the cover, this top cover off. Make sure the timing belt's still tight. Check the timing marks, you know, they're close, so it's nothing slipped. Because I put a new timing belt in this motor. And a water pump. And then you'll see in a video, I don't know if I put that video up, but I did a compression check. 2, 3, and 4 have nothing. Number 1 comes and goes. It'll go from 100 to 40. So the head gasket's obviously gone because the head on this one's more than likely warped. And then it's a 3-layer steel gasket, so it doesn't take much. You know, once the air starts, you know, squeaking underneath, it's junk. So anyways, you know, they've made a lot of progress with the valve timing on it. They've come up with new timing tensioners. This is the new style tensioner. This tensioner, this pulley with the bracket and the belt kit was nearly $200. So I'm glad it's got it. I don't have to buy it. But anyways, I don't know if any of you remember back in the 80s, the Escort. Some of the early Escorts, the first, I think, 2 or 3 years were non-interference motors. And you could tell by the color of the valve cover. I think if it was a blue valve cover and the timing belt broke, it needed a valve job. If it was a black valve cover motor, it was an interference motor, which means, you know, the belt breaks, it doesn't do any damage, and you're just out of timing belt. I used to own my own shop for a couple of years. I've worked at Ford, worked at GM, worked at Pontiac, Chevy dealerships. You know, I wasn't always a truck driver. And that's where I learned all this stuff. A lot of people got, you know, I'm not just guessing and out here just pulling parts apart, and it's a lot harder because of my back, but you know, it's still doable. I mean, you know, this, you could do this in your garage. Now, it would take you maybe all day to figure out how to get this thing into service mode like I have it right now. This is what they call service mode, okay? That front thing just sits there. There's a hinge right there at the bottom. I don't know if I can zoom in on that hinge. That's a hinge right there. And, which is also the front motor mount, by the way. But, you know, that was my point, was the interference and the non-interference motor. So that motor over there has been rebuilt. not rebuilt, the whole top end's been rebuilt, and it's grenaded. Replaced with this motor, the head gasket's gone out. Now we're going for that motor. And some of you are going to ask, well, why don't you just stick a head on this one? Well, the reason is, you know, I'm going in for neck surgery. If I tear this motor apart and all I need is head gaskets, a couple $100, because you need new head bolts, you know, intake, exhaust gaskets. You buy a whole head set. If I tear it apart and it's 4 or 5 thousandths warped, then I have to hunt up another head. That's, you know, the heads on these things are as much as the engines. I paid $500 for that engine right there, and that's supposed to be another 80 or 90,000 mile motor out of an Audi A4. That's got Audi all over that one. It's got a different throttle body. It's got sensors underneath it. But like I said, that's a $500 motor. I should be good just throwing a timing belt on that one, swapping my accessories, water pump, stuff like that, buying some O-rings. Worst case scenario with this motor is I have to swap the cranks. You know, that's a couple hours worth of work. If I have to buy a head for this one, I'm going to be in this engine for another $500. And then I'm going to have to hunt up a head, you know, and go get it machined, and, you know, and it's just, you see what I'm saying? Where I can just stick that motor in it and be done with it. Hopefully, yeah, I mean, that's just, it's a gamble, it's a flip. It's what I'm going to take a chance on. I don't know what else I was going to say. Oh, but they do make this car in an all-wheel drive version. If it's an all-wheel drive, it will have a differential in the back. But there you go. That is the deal with the Audi / Passatt, or Passatt, or Jetta, or whatever you want to call it. It's a Volkswagen Audi clone. Alright, we're at top dead center. Our timing marks are lined up with that notch and that mark right there. And I'm going to show you how far off we are down here. Okay. See the notch? From there to there. That's the notch in the crankshaft. See it? And then you can see the pointer. That's why you never trust them. Never ever trust them. Okay, that's how you get the cooling clutch fan off. Grab onto the pulley with a big pair of channel locks, and you stick that Allen wrench in the back, and it comes right off. Okay, that's the bolt that comes out of it. It's got a bearing. And there's also a bearing in the front of that. Alright, I got about another hour into it. Got that whole bracket off with the power steering pump. I just leave it all hooked up, pull it up, tie it with a bungee. There's the alternator. There's my water pump. You'll just have to replace the O-ring. This O-ring right here will need to be replaced. I may go ahead and put another thermostat in it, another O-ring. Damn antifreeze, I hate antifreeze. Fixing to crawl under it, get the turbo off and the exhaust and starter. Get the torque converter bolts out, and hopefully here in I don't know, this afternoon or tonight, I can be able to get this motor out. We will see. Alright, I've been fighting with this thing all morning. I've spent more time trying to get that catalytic converter out. There's 3 bolts that go from the exhaust pipe to the bottom of that. The last time I took it apart, I just cut the bolts, put new ones in it, and welded them to the converter so you can just spin nuts on the other side and tighten them up. One of them come loose. The weld didn't hold. With what I have to work with in my condition, I can't, you know, be messing around with it. So I pushed everything back. I cleaned up the floor, get most of this antifreeze picked up. I'm going to take the turbo off, and the short piece of pipe that was connected to that, that's still on the converter, will come out if I can get the turbo out of the way. You can see I've got the coolant pipe and the turbo drain line unhooked. So I went up, made me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Took me about an hour break.
Are you on your own business?
Now I gotta pick all my absorbent mats off the floor and see if I can get there's a return from the bottom of the turbo to the oil pan. I gotta get it loose and take those 3 bolts right there on the top out. You can see those 3 bolts. And that undo this coolant line and this turbo will come off. There's the turbo and there's the cat. Been working all afternoon because I couldn't get that bolt out. See, the others I welded so you can get them from the bottom easy. And then I went and busted a bolt off in the turbo I got to get out. Just can't win. Alright, that's the starter is out. That's the hole where the starter is. You see that bolt right there? That bolt right there. That's a torque converter bolt. There's 4 of them. You just turn the motor over until it lines up, reach in there with an extension and an impact, 17 millimeter, and pop the 4 out. Come out pretty quick. Alright, got all the motor mount bolts out. Torque converter bolts. Starter. Bell housing bolts. I've got a couple of hoses to unplug and a couple pieces of wiring, and we're going to have to push it outside, drag my A-frame in, clean all this mess up, clean the floor, and then push it back in when the A-frame's in the building, because you can't get the A-frame in here with the motor in here, or the car in here, so that's, I'll have to wait till brother-in-law gets home. He can help me do that, and then pull this thing out.